my name is Kiera, for those of you who don't know me. I am married to my husband, Jacob. He is my best friend and the best partner I could ever dream of. We are a month away from our 4-year wedding anniversary, which is so crazy to think about, but we've actually been together for 8 years. So we dated for about 4 years before we got married, and yeah, we're about to celebrate 4 years of marriage. I am a mom to the most beautiful, strong, brave, full of personality little girl who just turned a year old, which brings me to why I'm actually doing this video. I am not a YouTuber. I don't have any equipment. I'm filming this on my iPhone, and if you guys could see the setup, it's set up on my windowsill. So that's what we're working with. But I was posting about my daughter's first birthday, and I never really posted my birth story because it was a pretty traumatic, also exciting, but really hard moment in my life, which you'll learn about here in the next few minutes. And so I just needed some time to heal and grow and process everything and just get to a place where I felt strong enough and comfortable enough to share something that was really vulnerable in my life. And so it's been a year and I never shared it, and I honestly kind of thought people forgot about it. I didn't really think many people would be super interested in hearing it, but then as I was posting about my daughter's first birthday, I was getting a lot of Instagram DMs about the fact that I hadn't posted her birth story. People were like, I'm still waiting to hear your birth story. So in hearing that, I realized that I needed to tell it. So I did a poll on what people would want, whether they would want a YouTube video or a blog post, those that were interested, and it was actually pretty close, but YouTube won out, so that's why I'm filming this video. I am a 2 on the Enneagram, if you follow the Enneagram at all, which means I'm a helper. I'm a lot healthier, but it means I try to say yes to everything and make everyone feel loved and accepted. And so being an Enneagram 2, I'm probably going to also do a blog post. So if you're a person that was interested in that blog post, you can totally just stop the video if you want, and I will probably be posting that next week. So without further ado, we'll get into my birth story. I'm gonna start just telling my birth story, start to finish, of just the beautiful moment and the exciting times, and then I'm gonna get into the more hard stuff and the trauma that I experienced. So for those of you who might have triggers that have to do with trauma or abuse at all, I would maybe just watch the beginning of the video, and then when I get into the other details, you can kind of skip through that if you'd like. So I don't think I mentioned, my daughter's name is Evelyn. Her name is Evelyn Iris Albritton. And a little bit of background story about my pregnancy. I had a pretty rough pregnancy. I was super sick for about 20 weeks. So even the thought of food, I would just gag. So I would be trying to eat and I would be gagging, and I would throw up when I would eat, and it was rough. I'm a kids pastor at a local church, and so ministry is full-time all the time, and so it was just hard. I was working a full-time job up until I had Evelyn, and I was really sick. And then as my pregnancy progressed, I also got diagnosed with gestational diabetes. So I remember the day that I found out I got diagnosed with diabetes. I was literally crying because I was just like, come on, can I get a break? So at the time, you're supposed to be eating whatever you want in your life. I was on a strict carb count and had to prick myself 8 times a day. And Evelyn had been measuring 2 weeks ahead my entire pregnancy. So I ended up having to go to a fetal care specialist at the hospital towards the end of my pregnancy. And I was having to get ultrasounds every single week that were very detailed to see what she was measuring So that was kind of because of the diabetes. So there was a lot of added stress a little bit. I was a little bit nervous about how big she was going to be. And from the beginning, I really wanted a natural childbirth. So I did a lot to prepare for that. I exercised almost every day. At the end of my pregnancy, I was walking a mile a day. I read a really awesome book called Hypnobirthing, which I'll probably do another YouTube video about just how I prepped for natural birth, because I don't want to get into all those really long details. But anyway, I prepped really hard for natural birth, and that was my goal. But I was also open to like whatever path my birth took. Like I was just gonna take it and not be like set on one thing because I'd never experienced it before. So fast forward, I had like my last checkup at my fetal care specialist at the hospital, and they would always talk about how big she was, and the doctor was saying that he thought I should be possibly induced at 39 weeks because of her size, and if I wanted to go for a natural birth, the longer I waited, I would increase my risk of a C-section because of her size. So I followed up with that appointment, and then I was also having stress tests at my OB every single week. So they would put a band on and just measure Evelyn's movements, and she'd have to move a certain amount of time and a certain times in a certain amount of time. So that was happening, and so I went for my final checkup with my doctor, and she kind of followed up with the fetal care specialist, and decided she wanted me to decide because my doctor had a very natural approach to everything. So originally she was like, I'm not going to induce you until 42 weeks, like from the get-go of being her patient, which I loved everything about her. So, but here we were facing this challenge of like, if I wanted to have a natural birth, should I get induced, should I not? So we both talked and decided that it would probably be best that I go ahead and get induced. So that was on a Tuesday. And she was like, let me see if there are any appointments available today. And I was like, oh, okay. And she called me back, and the appointment they had available was Thursday at 5:30 for me to get induced. But my sister-in-law kind of talked, she has a very natural approach to a lot of things, and she has had 3 babies now. And one thing that really helped her go into labor naturally was getting acupuncture to induce labor. So that was something that my doctor said would be worth a shot, because at my last appointment, I was like dilated, nothing, like I was not effaced at all. So I tried to get an appointment that Wednesday, and I went and I got acupuncture. It's not as scary as you think it is, but I actually started having contractions on the table. It was pretty crazy. So that night, after having the acupuncture around 6 o'clock, I started having contractions like every 6 minutes, but they weren't close enough to like go to the hospital. So pretty much all night I was up. I was on the birthing ball. I was actually sending pictures to my friend Emily. I was just, trying to labor as much as I could at home. And there were moments where it got pretty intense. Then they kind of subsided and started getting further apart. So I was a little bit sad about that. So now we're into Thursday morning. I haven't slept. We're prepping to go to the hospital, and I check into the hospital at 5:30. When I get to the hospital, my doctor does my cervical check, and I am a centimeter dilated, and I'm 50% effaced. So it seemed like the acupuncture actually did give me some progress. So I was actually happy to have some kind of progress when I got to the hospital. My doctor's choice of induction was to insert Cervidil into my cervix to soften it. And her hopes were to do that twice before having to start Pitocin. But they went ahead and inserted the Cervidil. And as soon as that happened, shortly after that, I started having contractions every 2 minutes, and they were lasting a minute and a half. So right from the get-go, it was so intense. It was nothing that I'd ever experienced. I'll probably do another post about the things I used to get through labor, but it was really, really intense. I can't even describe what it felt like. But it kind of took a while. I was shaking from the pain. I was literally convulsing because it was just really intense, and I was really cold, and there was nothing that really could do to warm me up. And at the hospital that I was laboring at, they actually had tubs, birthing tubs. And so my husband and I decided to get in the birthing tub. So they put a wireless monitor on me of Evelyn, and we got in the tub, and that was amazing. I was having the most intense contractions according to my nurse, but I was barely feeling them. So it was amazing. I highly recommend, if you have a hospital with a tub, getting in the tub if you're trying a natural labor. So there I was in the tub, and then the contractions started getting more intense, and Evelyn wasn't really handling it well. So my nurse decided to have me get out of the tub so that she could take the Cervidil out, because I had progressed enough at that point. And so I continued just to labor in the room, in the bed, as much as I could. It was really intense. And so it's now like 3:30 in the morning, and remember, I haven't slept in over 24 hours, and at this point I've been in labor for, let's see, about 9 hours. So in one of my natural childbirthing class, they talked about nitrous oxide, which is kind of like laughing gas to like help with the pain a little bit. And since I was trying to not get an epidural because of my natural approach, but to be honest, the epidural like freaked me out a little bit, like the whole process of it. And so I decided to try the laughing gas, which really helped me a lot. Like I would breathe in during the contraction and it would give me some kind of relief, and it helped me rest a little bit in between to kind of gear up for when I was going to have to push. So at 3:30, I started taking the laughing gas to help a little bit. And I remember like so many times looking at Jacob and being like, can I do this? Like, do I need to get an epidural, or like, can I do this? And of course he was like leaving it up to me, but he's like, I believe you can do it, but you know, you have to make the decision. And I remember us having a conversation. He was like, if you want to get the epidural, like you need to get it now, like you're about to run out of time. But I decided just to like push through, because I remember reading about like when your labor gets so intense, you're usually transitioning into getting ready to have the baby. So I just kept trying to remind myself of that as it got really, 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 really intense. And I got to a point where I was almost blacking out from the pain, which is something that's commonly talked about in childbirth, actually, that you'll kind of lose track of time and you'll black out a little bit because your body's going through a lot. So that happened. I continued to labor. Nothing super exciting was going on, just continuing to progress and process that. And then around 7:30, a shift change happened, and my nurses from like before the night shift happened actually came back, which I was so excited. I cried when they entered my room. I was so happy because they were so amazing, and it was literally like God sent angels to me through them. So they came back and they were like, okay, we need to get you up and moving. And my doctor ended up coming and checking in on me, and I was fully dilated. So she asked me to go sit on the toilet. She has like a natural approach to everything, which I love. And the point of that was to try to see if gravity would like help get things moving. So I remember sitting on the toilet, my contractions were like so intense. Jacob was a trooper, like rubbing my back and helping me through that transition. And then all of a sudden, this might be TMI, but I literally felt like Evelyn's head was like coming out. Like I looked at my doctor and said, I'm pretty sure she's like coming out, like she's hanging out. And she kind of tickled, like laughed a little bit. And then she was like, okay, well, let's have you stand up and let's go to the bed for you to push. And I went to get up, and I had been sitting on the toilet so long that both of my legs were asleep. So they were completely numb. So as I got up, I was like dealing with contractions, and then also like the tingling of like my legs going to sleep. And my doctor was like, well, we need to get you in the bed. So do you want us to grab a wheelchair for you? And I was like, no, it's fine. I'll just, get up and try to do it myself. So I got up and I started kind of moving my legs around, and I was able to make it to the bed. And that was around 8 o'clock. So I have like pictures of me when I was in the bathroom. So that was like 7:52, and then like 8 o'clock I was in the bed getting ready to push. And at this point, since my doctor set came in and all of that, I wasn't using laughing gas anymore. So because I can't just carry that around. So I'm laboring around the room, and I get into the bed and they're like, okay, it's time to push. And so I had to bear down and push really hard. I had read a lot about this, but I didn't realize like how much bearing down you actually have to do. But it was pretty amazing because your body has this natural reflex when you're giving birth naturally that kicks in, that you're like, okay, I have to get this baby out. And I know like your body just starts to like almost convulse to like push. So I began pushing. The next thing I know, my doctor and everyone was like, you can see her head, and she has a head full of hair. Which in all the ultrasounds, they would always tell me like they could see her hair like waving around in the ultrasound. So I was like really excited, and they were like, do you want to look? Because there was a mirror above, and I was like, no. But I ended up looking and saw like just all this like head full of hair. So I began pushing, and the next thing I know, my doctor was like, Kiera, do you want to deliver her yourself and be like the first person to like hold your baby? And I was like, I don't know. And my nurses were really encouraging me, like, come on, you can do it. And so I actually reached down and delivered her myself. And it was the most, like, I'm kind of tearing up, magical moment of my life. I was just so enamored with her, and I was crying, and I kept looking at Jacob and saying, she's the cutest baby I've ever seen. Like, she is the cutest baby I've ever seen. And I just fell so in love with her and put her right on my chest, and she nursed right away, and we had a golden hour of like skin to skin with just us and with Jacob, and it was such a beautiful moment. And as she was born, it was 8:25, so I really only pushed for 25 minutes, and she was here. And we, as she was born, the sun was rising through the window, and I played worship music my entire labor just because it helped me to stay calm, and also helped me just to connect with God and find the strength that I needed in like certain moments. And so she was born as worship music was playing, and God's presence was like so full in the room that I even had my nurses comment on it and my doctor, and it was just a beautiful moment. It was the most perfect day, and I loved it, and it was so exciting to actually like hold her in my arms and have her there. So that is my birth story in a nutshell. Now what I'm going to get into is a little bit of like why I was suffering from PTSD and all of that. So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it just because it's super detailed and there's just a lot involved. So I just kind of want to give you an overview of what happened, and if you're more interested in learning more, you can just reach out to me. So the nurses I had at the hospital were amazing, but when the shift change happened or at night, I got a new nurse, and she was a traveling nurse, which means she didn't work from the hospital. She was staffed in. And just from the beginning, the way like her bedside manner and her care for me were just very terrible, if I could say that. Like the moment I wanted to go get in the birthing tub, she was like, you know, you can, but just so you know, women die birthing in there. And just really instilled a lot of fear from the beginning. Another thing that she was doing was she would come in to check my cervix, and she would tell me to breathe through the contraction, and she would say, I'm going to stretch your cervix to the next centimeter. So every time she came in, she would have me breathe through the contraction, and she would stretch my cervix, which was really painful in the middle of a contraction. A little while after that, she went out to my mom in the waiting room and said, just so you know, if she doesn't progress, I'm not afraid to break her water. And that like really caused like an alarm in my mom. And so my mom ended up following her back into the room after she said that, and she was doing another one of those cervical checks. And as she was doing it, she's like, oh my gosh, your water just broke in my hand. But I could feel her like puncture like my like sac, and it was really, really painful. I was literally crawling all the way up the bed with like tears running down my face because remember, I've had no pain medicine or anything like that. And it was just a really painful experience. So all of that's happening, and like I asked her for a birthing ball because I had one in the car, but Jacob didn't want to leave me because my contractions were so intense. And she was like, I don't know where they are, I don't work here. So there was just a lot of like really rough things. And so, but anyway, I'm like oblivious. I've never had a baby before. Jacob's never had a baby before. So, you know, you trust the people that you're in their care. And so I just went along with everything. Yes, she had an attitude. Yes, she was kind of rude, but you know, I was like, maybe she had a long day. I don't know. So I get through my entire labor, and after I have Evelyn, for the next 4 hours, I'm like bleeding a lot, and the bleeding isn't stopping. And so they start Pitocin to try to stop the bleeding, and I have IVs in both my arms, which made it really hard to nurse and all of these different things. And I hear the doctors and nurses talking, and basically they were like, if you don't stop bleeding, like we're gonna have to do something. So they would come and check me every 30 minutes and weigh my pads, and it was just, that was traumatic. My doctor would come in and like push on my uterus to kind of see like if the bleeding had stopped, and every time she would push on my uterus, I know this is too much, like probably TMI, but there would just be like blood that was like flooding, like gushing the bed over and over again. So I remember just like praying and asking my family to pray that God would stop the bleeding. Like I was just really begging. I had had a really rough pregnancy, and I'm like, come on, God, like I just want to enjoy this time with my baby. So needless to say, it didn't stop. And you know, there's a lot of times in our life where we want things to go a certain way and we expect things to go a certain way, But the problem is sometimes they don't, no matter what you're facing in life. And so when your expectations change or shift, it can be really hard. And you can have moments where you feel like God is like totally abandoning you. And that's how I felt in that moment. And so my doctor came in and I had to sign a paper basically saying that I was gonna have to go back for exploratory surgery because they had no idea where the bleeding was coming from. And I also had to give permission that I might have to be cut open if they couldn't find where the bleeding was coming from. So that was just really hard for me because I had just went through all of this labor for like over 20 something hours, and here I am, I did it naturally, and now I might have to be cut open and have surgery anyways. Like, it was just really, really rough. But I had the most amazing doctor, and I trusted her with like my life. Like, she was amazing. So I get taken back for surgery. I have to go by myself, so no one can go back with me. I've never been put under like ever before for anything, so that was just really scary for me. But God had like sent another person. I had a friend that works at the hospital, and she had told her friend that works in surgery that I was gonna be giving birth, and if anything happened, like, to look out for me. So she came to me and was like, "Hi, I'm your friend's friend. She told me about you." And so God really just ordained like a lot of things in that moment, aligned things in that moment. So I went back for surgery. It was 6 hours before I came back after surgery. So that was 6 hours that I was away from Evelyn and her not nursing, and it was just rough. And then when I came back from surgery, of course, I'm out of it. And but when I was back for surgery, they found out I had a cervical tear. So I had a tear in my cervix, and my doctor had to work really hard to get the stitches where they should have been. I later found out after talking to my doctor that I almost ended up having a hysterectomy because even after they stitched, the bleeding just wasn't stopping. So that happened, and then I was packed with like a lot of packing, and my doctor was like, "Let's just wait and see, like 24 hours and see what happens." I was also at the point of needing a blood transfusion. I lost 2 liters of blood during all of that, but my doctor was also like, "She's only 27, let's see if her body can, like, you know, she's healthy, let's see if her body can kind of regain strength." So I came back from surgery, and I was in labor and delivery for another night. So we were there for 2 nights because I couldn't go up to mother and baby until the bleeding had completely stopped. So for the next 24 hours was just still really intense because I was scared that like the bleeding wasn't stopping and I was gonna have to go back for surgery again. But all in all, the bleeding ended up stopping, and I was able to go up to the mother and baby floor. So I was in the hospital for a total of, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 4 nights and 5 days. I went home, I got there Thursday, and I went home late Monday night. So it was just a really exhausting time, and I didn't sleep almost the entire time because I was really suffering from a lot of PTSD from the stuff that the nurse was doing to me. And but long story short, my doctor was kind of asking me questions, and I began telling her like what the nurse was doing, and she was like really alarmed and was getting really upset because the stretching of my cervix was completely illegal. Obviously, like her breaking my water. There were some things my doctor told her not to do that she deliberately did anyways. And while I went back for surgery, my mom actually went and found my doctor and told my doctor, "I don't want this woman around my daughter again." And then my doctor started asking questions and then revealed kind of everything that happened. And so that moment she got removed from the floor and wasn't allowed to be like around me anymore. And then, so I'm kind of waking up from surgery, finding out all of this. The president of the hospital was meeting with me the day before I'm discharged, just explaining that she is really sorry and that was never supposed to happen. And it was a very vulnerable time in my life for that to happen. And so obviously there's like, it's the medical field, so it's hard to prove if something caused something. But for me, I'm like, okay, the fact that I had a cervical tear and this person was manipulating my cervix with her hands over and over and over and over again, kind of is weird to me. So, so following that, when I got home even, it was probably like over a week before I actually slept. Like I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sit in silence. Like I had to just constantly be listening to music because I would just kind of like break. the first couple, like, week of Evelyn's life, I could barely really stand up and hold her very much because I was bruising so bad from the loss of blood. Then I had to go through like the nursing challenges, and if you've breastfed, you know how hard that is. And then I ended up, there was one night that Jacob almost had to call an ambulance because I was about to pass out like in the chair, and he had to run and get me iron pills because my blood loss was just so low. Like, losing 2 liters of blood is a lot. When I left the hospital, my hemoglobin level was still at a 7, which is really, really, really low. So I say all that to say, it has been a journey for me. Evelyn turning a year old was exciting and something to celebrate, and she's amazing, and we're both healthy and well now. But it's also going to always be an anniversary of something that was just really, really, really hard for me. And it's just taken a lot of time to process and to realize that like, I had to get to a point where I had to type up everything that happened to me on the computer and just like shut it and decide to move on and to be present, because I couldn't just keep dwelling on that. But I mean, I still drive past the hospital and I still have anxiety driving past it. There's still just a lot of things that still hurt. Like, there's days where I'm still grieving the fact that I missed time with her in the beginning of her life. Like, there's a lot of pictures that we don't have, like when she's first born, with all 3 of us, because I was getting wheeled away and I was in like a dangerous like situation. But God really, like, when he sent my other nurses back, like, they were amazing. And I'm so thankful that the nurses I had when Evelyn was actually coming into the world, it was a beautiful moment and the sun was rising and it was amazing. And I'm kind of thankful that I didn't really realize that all those things the nurse was doing to me was abuse and that it was illegal, because I could really just focus on her birth and everything seemed normal to me, and I was able to love her and love the moment. But then afterwards was when I found out like all this different information. So for me, it took a lot of moments of just reaching and asking for help and just being really honest and open about how I was feeling, and if I was suffering from like PTSD, just like saying that, and just giving myself a lot of grace and time to heal, and also just having someone like my husband who was very gentle and loving and nurturing, and just kept reminding me. There were times where I was like, I don't know that I'm ever going to be like myself again after this. And he was like, you know, you will, like, you'll be yourself again. And just having friends that I could call and say, hey, like, I need help, and just come and sit with me and pray with me. And so, yeah, that is my story. It was really hard and rough, but I will say that it's also one of the times in my life where I felt God the most, and I felt his presence the most, because I needed him to show up in my life. And he's redeemed so many things. Like, even Evelyn's birthday, there were times where I was reflecting on the fact that I was away from her for 6 hours. I was reflecting on how I was away from her for like 6 hours when she was born, and it was really easy for me to try to let the enemy steal that away from me again. But I was like, nope, like, you might have taken that time from me last year, but this year, like, I'm gonna be present with her. And just making those decisions to choose to fight back and choose to move forward and choose healing is really important. I also just, like, I think a thing I struggled with was people always said, like, everything happens for a reason and God always allows things for a reason. And that's an easy thing to say, but when you're abused by someone in your most vulnerable time in your life, then you're struggling with, like, okay, did God allow this to happen? And where was God? And one thing that God began to show me as I healed and as I looked for healing was that he was there the entire time. Like, he was there in the room with me when that was happening. And he never actually wanted that to happen. Like, God didn't ordain for that nurse to abuse me. And that wasn't like a reason that God had for my life or a plan God had for my life. But the world is broken and people sin. And this nurse obviously had some kind of issues that she was struggling with, to actually do that to someone in their most vulnerable time. And so that was another thing that God had to show me, was that, like, God doesn't just, like, everything happens for a reason. Like, God uses bad things that happen to us and negative things that happen to us, and God turns it for good, but he doesn't choose for it to happen. Like, it happens, and then God uses that for good, and he brings good out of it. So yeah, so that is my birth story in a nutshell. I know it's kind of long. There's a lot more details, but Like I said, if you're interested, I can share them with you. But I just wanted to share this also so that any other first-time moms know what's normal and what's not normal, and that you can speak up and that you can actually ask a nurse to leave your room, which is something, if that happens again, I will be doing in the future. And just know that like you're all on your own journey, and if you are struggling with something or trauma, just seek healing and seek help and reach out to those that love you, because they want to be there and they want to help you. So yeah, I hope you guys all have a great day. I hope you learned maybe something from this video. If not, I hope it encouraged you that no matter what we face, God is with us and He's going to help us get through it.